The Against All Odds podcast, sponsored by Oak Forest Recovery.
Welcome to the Against All Odds podcast. I am your host, Rachel, and we have co-host RJ, and we have my girl, Breezy, in the building today. Yeah.
Just clear the throat a little bit.
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to see you. And also, I've never really heard your full story.
I know.
So I'm really excited for that. Yeah.
So boring. Just kidding.
It's going to be a wild ride with Breezy. I already know.
Yeah. I was a straight alcoholic though. So
really?
Yeah. So listening to your guys' podcast, I'm like,
We got some Alkies on here.
Yeah.
So you're a purebred.
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 I think that's like when people tell me, I used to back in the day, like when I would go to treatment, I'd be like, oh my God, the alcoholics aren't as like down bad. But really, if you think about, when I think about it now, how socially acceptable alcohol is, like if I went to a gas station and they had crack and heroin in my face, advertised all the time, and it was socially acceptable, and like I could be a socially acceptable crackhead.
Yeah.
That would be a lot more difficult because it's such a socially acceptable thing, you know?
I have so much respect for alcoholics, like true alcoholics.
Actually getting sober.
Yeah, because like when you stop using heroin and shooting speedballs,
everyone's like, yay.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is just like you don't see heroin at every corner.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't go to dinner and people are ordering heroin with their meal.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Commercials. Could you imagine?
Even still today, it's like, oh, what do you mean you want a mocktail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's hard, but
yeah, well, let's jump into it.
Yeah. Where should we start?
Wait, so where are you from? Palm Springs? Or are you from Orange County? You're from Palm Springs.
I'm from Palm Desert.
Got it. Oh, Palm Desert.
Yeah. RJ's been to my dad's house.
I have.
I haven't been to your dad's house. Me next.
Yes, please. I know. I want to have like a little girls' weekend.
It's a sick house. I mean, it's like.
That's not the house I grew up in, though. Yeah.
Okay, so take us back. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
A Breezy story.
Yeah. So I was obviously born and raised in Palm Desert, California. I'm one of 5, but my mom she says she's been married like 6 or 7 times, but my dad says she's been married like 8 or 9. So I'm not 100% sure. But my sister, she was born first with a different dad. And then my 2 brothers and I have the same dad. And then my youngest brother has a different dad. I've had many step siblings. One of them actually has also passed away from this disease. But my dad is in his own 12-step program. And he got like sober in recovery when I was 3. So essentially that was like the reason my parents ended up getting divorced when I was like 2 or 3 years old. And it was pretty much like a big wake-up call for my dad to stop. His issue was gambling, and he had literally just lost everything.
Oh my God.
And so
gambling's one of the craziest.
He always says that. Wow. Yeah, he's like, you want to try getting,
have you ever gambled?
I mean, I have like here and there, but it's always scared me.
It's never been a thing.
And also, like, I don't have the money to be gambling. So, like, I mean, I feel like one of my brothers, he's dabbled in it too.
But was your dad like one of those stories of somebody who's like the whole house and like everything is gone?
Oh, yeah. Wow. And so he was a business owner too. He owned like 18 or 19 Domino's pizza stores at this point.
Yeah, right.
And he, at this point in his
the Domino's mogul.
Yeah, pretty much. And so he got to this point where he had lost all of his money. He couldn't make rent on any of his Domino's pizza stores. And through his amends process, he had to go to each store and be like, hey, I don't have rent, to pay for this store.
Wow.
And each person, and he had to tell them like, I gambled it all away. And each store was like, okay, just figure it out. And so he eventually got back on his feet and was able to pay all of the stores back. And
wow.
Yeah. But
what a way to grow up though.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
It was
pure chaos. Yeah. Pure chaos. And it didn't come out until later in I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, I found out, like, because I had been raised like, oh, that's why mom and dad got divorced. And then it came out later on that my mom had actually had an affair on my dad and gotten pregnant and by another man and had to, you know, my dad ended up finding out about it. She didn't have the child. But that was like, you know, the main reason for why they got divorced.
Wow.
So, you know, in my childhood years, it was always like this big hidden secret. And I always felt like there was something else.
That was there.
Yeah. And my dad's sister, my aunt, she kind of had like this very big resentment towards my mom because of it. And my dad, same thing. It was like, my dad was constantly like kind of throwing jabs at my mom. And, you know, as a kid, you're like, what is really going on?
Right,
you know?
Right.
And so there was just, you know, lots of chaos. And my mom has this thing with men and, you know, getting married many times. And so it was just kind of like, I always felt like, okay, mom doesn't really love me the way she loves the men in her life. And, you know, I don't believe that I became an alcoholic because of that. Like, it's obviously in our genetics. My aunt died from this disease on my mom's side. My cousin has passed away on my dad's side from, you know, addiction. So it's definitely in our genes. And so I don't believe that, like, I don't believe that it was because of that. But it definitely gave me that like victimhood mindset growing up. And I remember from like a very early age being suicidal, and just always wanting to not feel the way I felt. And so, you know, it started off with bulimia and cutting and, you know, and then eventually I found alcohol. And my younger brother, he's the...
When did that stuff start? Like the bulimia, the cutting? When did you start to like...
I would say I was probably like 10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Really young. And it was like, I also feel like because my parents were divorced, you know, we would go back and forth from mom's house to dad's house.
Was it like 1 week?
Yeah. And they lived like down the street from each other. And so you know, I felt like I lived two different lives. Like my mom was like very middle class, and then my dad was, you know, much more wealthy. And
so interesting. I had the exact same experience.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
1 week.
Yeah.
And the disparity between the two was exactly the same.
Yeah. And it really does.
I had two different lives.
Yeah, exactly.
I had two parallel lives moving at the same time.
Yes.
And I could hide. Really easy.
Yep. And it was like I could play my parents against each other because they secretly hated each other, and I knew that.
How old were you when they got divorced?
I was 3.
Oh, okay. So pretty much your whole life.
Yeah. I don't remember them together. I have like one memory, and it was because I chopped my bangs like literally to here.
As we do.
Yeah.
Every kid goes through that phase,
literally
right?
At like 2 years old. And I remember going into the kitchen and I was like, look, like so excited.
Horrified.
And my mom just like, or my dad grabs me and just like takes me away because he knew my mom was just going to freak out. So like, that's like one of my only memories of my parents being together. I don't remember them together at all. And so, it was like, and, you know, very quickly, I think my mom remarried someone else. And so it was just like we moved all the time with my mom. It depended on, you know, which guy she was with. And then my dad was like the very stable one in a program. We, you know, had the same house growing up my whole life. And up until recently when he finally sold it. And so it was like and my sister was from a different dad. So my sister always stayed at my mom's. My younger brother was from a different dad. So he would go somewhere else. And so it's just like true dysfunction, chaos.
There's a lot going on.
But the really cool thing that my dad did was, you know, when they got divorced, and mind you, we were all very young, he put us in therapy immediately. And so we saw a therapist for like, I want to say like a year or two as kids.
Oh, wow.
So, and I wished like we had stuck with it. But when I turned, I think it was like 15 or 16. So I have 3 brothers and then 1 sister, but only 2 brothers with my dad. And my dad was always the one who, you know, reprimanded us or, you know, the one we would listen to.
Yeah.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
And so my brothers were allowed to have girlfriends and I was not allowed to date. Like that was like a strict rule. Like,
Interesting.
yeah, mind you, my brother is younger than me and he has a girl pretty much living with us. And I was like 15 years old, like, what? But I'm not allowed to, you know?
Yeah.
And so I always just kind of felt like there was something wrong with me. You know, there was no like explanation as to why. It was just like, well, there was. My dad would just constantly be like, I don't want you to end up like your mom. And so it was like this constant voice in the back of my head. Yes.
Of your mom and his trauma from your mom.
Yeah.
He was imprinting onto you.
Yep.
Wow.
So I pretty much, that was like the voice in the back of my head of just like, you can't be like your mom. You can't be like your mom. You can't be like your mom.
Wow.
And so I think I was like 16. My dad finally was like, I want you to, you know, see a therapist. And that was the reason. Like, I just don't want you to end up like your mom. And I was like, okay. But I'm like, why? You know, my brother's like doing drugs already at this point. Like, and he's
his girlfriend's
I'm like, but he's okay. And he's not allowed, you know, he doesn't have to go to therapy. So it was just like, and I get it, like from my dad's perspective, of course, now hindsight, and I'm so grateful because, you know, now at my age, like I love therapy. I'm in it, you know? And so like I was raised knowing that therapy was okay and it was a safe place to go to. But it, at the time, because it wasn't really explained to me other than like, oh, it's like a negative, like, I don't want you to end up like this, rather than like, I just want to make sure that you make the right choices, you know? Yeah. I feel like language really matters at that age. And so I always just kind of felt like there was something wrong with me. And I think I had my first drink at 13. And I found, you know, the kid at school that had like similar trauma, and we became best friends. And, you know, we would go in her parents' liquor cabinet. I think she got a nose job at like 16.
Oh, okay.
This is like 16. Yeah. And
face isn't even developed yet.
I know.
But 16 got a nose job.
And so
I guess that makes sense though. Depends on what's going on. I mean,
yeah. I mean, she regretted it after the fact, but because of the fact that like you're still a child, like your face was going to probably form into it. But
I'm so surprised a doctor would do that too. That's kind of interesting.
I know.
That's California.
Yeah,
right?
I know, literally. So she had been prescribed Vicodin, and we were like messing around with stuff like that, and I just remember, I don't remember my first drink. I have no recollection of it because to me, it's like, yeah, when people are like, oh, I remember, like when you hear in meetings, like,
God
like
spoke to me.
To me, it's like my first drink ended up my second, my third, my fifth, my 17th, you know? So I don't remember it. I just remember feeling like this was what I was missing. And so then like the bulimia stopped, the cutting stopped, like I had found alcohol. And I was pretty good at hiding it because my whole life I was hiding stuff. Like I always felt like I was living a double life. And I was, you know, I was really good at softball, and I was, you know, in theater, and, you know, I was like part of the popular group, and all my friends were doing it, you know, so I never really thought that I had a problem.
Was it just at parties and stuff, or were you drinking like all the time?
I was hiding alcohol in my house. I remember I had a purse that I would like smash beer cans in and put them in this purse. So that, because I was like, I don't know how to get rid of it.
You mean like instead of throwing away in the trash?
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, this is like the secret stash that like no one's going to find out that I'm drinking. And, but I had gotten caught several times, sneaking out at other friends' houses. And cause I would sneak out of my dad's house, but there was no real reason to like sneak out of my mom's house. My mom's house was she eventually had divorced the other husband and found another guy out in Orange County. And so she would they would get in fights and she would drive to his house in Orange County to make it right. Yeah. So then it was like, okay, well, you know, we have, you know, no one watching.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have to sneak out of her house. But my dad's house, I was always terrified of sneaking out of. So I would go have sleepovers at, you know, other kids' houses that didn't have the same supervision either. And I remember this one night, oh my God, at this point, I think I'm 16. I was dating this guy that was 19. And so we went to this girl's house, me, the nose job girl, and this other girl. And
nose job girl.
Yes, thank you.
Shout out.
I really hope she doesn't watch this. So we end up going to this girl's house, and she wants to go to a party, and I was like, me and this other girl were like, no, we're gonna go hang out with our really old boyfriends and just drink at their house. And she ends up getting arrested at this warehouse party. And so her dad obviously finds out that we all snuck out, and she calls us like, the jig's up, you know, just go home. So I end up going home, and my dad's like, oh, you're not sleeping over at her house. I'm like, no, it's fine. And like, I'm in my room, and all of a sudden I hear banging on my dad's front door, and it's 2 a.m. and the dad shows up just to tell my dad what a piece of shit I am, and that like we all snuck out. We're all losers. We're all drinking all the time. And my dad comes in my room, and I'm like shaking. You know, that was the first time I'd ever really gotten caught and in trouble. And I was just like, oh no. So then of course, you know, you just get smarter, and you're like, well, I'm going to stay away from that girl. So then I start hanging out with girls that are a little bit older than me. And, you know, we did the sneak out of the window, roll the car down the street, make sure that the car doesn't, you know, make noise. And, you know, so but I was, you know, I still got really good grades. I ended up getting into college, and my younger brother, he was the drug addict. And so by that point, you know, he had been to treatment a couple of times. And so all the attention kind of shifted towards him.
How much older was he?
No, I'm 16 months older than him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Younger. Oh, okay.
So he had been to treatment a few times. I had gone and visited him.
And this is around like 16, 17 or?
I was
I guess
like
going to college, so 18?
No, I was probably like a senior in high school when he started going to treatment.
Okay.
And
so he was like 16.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he actually went to Visions twice. Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And
what was he using? Was it like heroin? And
no, I think it was more like cocaine at the time.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. But, you know, I would go up to family week with him, and my dad and I were the ones that drove him to treatment and dropped him off. So like I was well aware that there was help, but I wasn't bad yet. So to me, it was just like, I was like, you know, I'm not doing drugs. I'm literally having fun. Yeah. I was like, I'm not doing drugs like him. Like he's the problem, which was good for me, because then I got to do whatever I wanted, and nobody was looking at me. So, he ended up getting out of Visions at one point, and I went to some AA meetings with him. And I remember sitting in the meeting, it was like the Ohio Street meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remember relating to everything that everyone was feeling.
Interesting.
And I was like, I don't like this. Like, why am I relating to all of the feelings? Like, I hadn't had the yets yet. But all of the feelings that people were sharing about, I was like, oh, I wonder if I'm supposed to be here, you know? And so then I started, you know, my dad goes to other 12-step programs too. And I was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to be in, you know, something else. And like it was never going to be alcohol, because alcohol was my best friend. So I ended up going to college in San Francisco, and, you know, then it was just off to the races. Then it was drinking every day, blacking out all the time, you know, but to me, still, it was like, that's kind of what everyone was doing. Like, sure, I was like the worst, but it was like normalized.
It's college. It was college days.
Yeah, it was college. Yeah. So I end up...
San Francisco's a fun place to party too.
Oh my God.
When you're like 18, 19.
Yeah. And I had a fake ID. But I got to this point, it was my second year of college, and I was like, I wonder if any of these people would be my friend if I stopped drinking. And
That's an interesting thought to have.
right. And
Like, what a thought,
I
right?
know, like normal
That you're
people
like-
don't have these thoughts.
That's what I mean. Like,
Right.
what a-
Yeah. So,
I wonder if they
yeah.
would still be my friend if I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
Like,
So
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
if you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
and they weren't. So I end up giving up drinking for Lent because I was just like, okay, I have to stop. Like I want to see if I can even stop.
Yeah.
And I end up giving it up for Lent. I don't remember how many days I made it, but I realized everyone stopped inviting me out. Like no one wanted to hang out with me anymore. And so I'm
no longer as fun.
exactly.
You were like the wet
And
blanket.
also it's like I'm a dry drunk at that point. So I
Yeah.
was miserable.
Right.
And, just hating on everyone else because everyone else was having fun and I couldn't. And, I was like, for me, now like doing all of the work that I've done, I realized like because my mom seemingly always chose men over me, I was really seeking out people who were going to choose me over someone else. So like I was, not a good person. I was going after girls' boyfriends and all of the things. And so like there was other reasons why people didn't want to hang out with me, but in my head it was like, oh, it had to be the alcohol. So I'm a geographical person. I'm a runner. And so by that time I was like, these people all suck. They all hate me. I'm going to move to Australia.
Wait, did you go to Australia?
I lived in Australia for a year.
No way. How old were you? At like,
Dude.
At like 19?
Yeah.
What?
I went
20.
to Australia for a year at 18.
What the fuck? Why are we
This
the
is
same
weird.
person?
What? Okay, we continue.
This is weird.
Wait, when's your birthday?
Yeah, right?
What
May
sign?
28th.
What sign?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, we don't have the same birthday.
That would have been crazy.
You're similar on my dad. Remember we were talking about
Capricorn,
this?
January
yes.
15th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, that's so weird. So,
Oh my God. So wait, where did you go in Australia?
I
Sydney?
studied abroad. Yeah. I lived in Sydney,
Okay.
well, the outskirts of Sydney. I went to Macquarie University. I was only supposed to go for 6 months. My sister had just had her first kid. And I remember like I was holding my niece and I was just hysterically crying because it was like, I knew why I had to go to Australia. Because my whole, I could have gone and studied abroad other places, but I was like, I need to go to a place where I'm legally allowed to drink.
Right. Yeah.
And all of my life choices
They
were
speak English.
always
Big drinking culture.
Yes, huge
18.
drinking culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was like, I knew I had to go to continue what I wanted to do, but I was holding this person that I loved for the first time, like more than anything. And I was just crying. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm literally leaving this child for 6 months. And it's not like I'm like down the street where I can just take a flight home, So it's like, I knew I was going to have to be gone for those 6 months. And I was like, so I was hysterically crying and I knew it's this choice, you have so many choices in life and I could have stayed, but I wanted to go. And so I went and, I thought I was bad in San Francisco, but man,
Australia's
Australia
Yeah.
is insane.
Yeah.
And
Were you hanging out with Australians or was it mostly people there abroad?
it was mostly people that were
Right.
studying abroad.
It was
We
so
had like
interesting
a
'cause when I was there, it was like most of the people I hung out with were from abroad, not actual Australians.
Yeah.
And every once in a while you'd meet an authentic Australian. I'd be like, oh my God, mate. Like, what's going on? Let's throw some shrimp on the barbie.
No, I got really into the culture. I was eating kangaroo like every morning.
It's so good. Rue burgers and the whole thing. Yeah,
the little kangaroo sausages. Like, it was crazy.
So lit.
And like the goon bags. Yeah, that was like.
Wait,
so,
what's a goon bag?
So
Bagged wine.
So Australian alcohol is unbelievably expensive. Like it's like triple the price that it is here, which like if someone had told me that, I'd probably be like, well, I'm not going to go there then. But it was super expensive. So like the cheapest thing that you could get is
Goon.
Is it
which
like
is
box
wine
Box
in
wine.
a bag. But you
Okay.
just like
You
always
take
just
the
have the
bag out
bag.
and they
And
slap
slap
the
the
bag.
bag.
Slap the
Goon.
bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and that was like the first time where I was like waking up and drinking alcohol.
Right.
And I gained like 30 pounds. Like it was not good.
What year was this? When you went?
God, I don't know, 2011?
Okay. I
Maybe?
was there 2007, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
2011, 2012 maybe. And I had almost died like 5 times.
Wow.
I got
Alcohol poisoning?
No, I would get blacked out and I would go swim in the ocean.
Oh my God.
And this one time I ended up like I was in a blackout. I was in the ocean. My friends were on the beach. Like they saw me. I was fully clothed and I would just run into the ocean. And
That's such a you thing.
Like,
That's such a breezy moment.
everyone knows, like, Breezy, don't.
Yeah.
You gotta watch Breezy.
Yeah,
You know what I
literally.
mean? Make sure there's no oceans
yeah.
around.
yeah.
Breezy just takes off
She's
running.
gonna swim.
People are trying to tackle her. She's like,
She's
no!
going. She's going. And I ended up miles down. I had lost consciousness and I was taken away
In the current.
Yes.
Oh my
and I woke
God.
up in rocks. Like what are the like jetty?
Yeah,
Getty?
yeah, yeah.
What are they called?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's like a bay.
yeah,
Yeah.
You
of
got those-
rocks.
Yeah, right.
And there was like a party or a wedding or something that was happening on the rocks.
Oh my
And
God.
all of these people see me. I wash up in the rocks.
Holy shit.
And, you know, all these people are trying to help me out. And I was like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And I just end up walking back home this was while we were on vacation for like spring break or something. And, I think it was like in Byron Bay or something. And, yeah, so you know, that was just like a normal thing. Like it was whatever. And the amount of times that stuff like that happened where I would get in a blackout, you know, go swimming in the ocean. But just like I would end up, you know, on the trains because obviously I didn't have a car. They have great public transportation. I would end up on trains by myself and I would fall asleep or black out, whatever. And I would end up, you know, so far
away.
down
Yeah.
the road. And I would, you know, I came to and I'd be like, oh shit, there's no one else on the train. This one time there was this guy on the train. And I was like, hey, will you walk me home? And he literally walks me home. And I could have easily been murdered. You know, we
Yeah.
were walking through like forests to
Yeah.
get back to where I was living. You know, stuff like that. Like I would fall in bushes, you know, at 10 a.m. and bus drivers would pull over and pick me up and put me in the bus and be like, where do you live? You know, I had so many angels throughout my drinking days that, you know, literally could have easily taken advantage of me and somehow I survived. So that was Australia and I was only supposed to stay 6 months, but my 21st birthday was 6 months away from the 6 months that I was supposed to be there. And I was like, well, I can't go back to the States yet. You know, I'm not 21 and I'm after having been
The
legally
freedom,
allowed
right.
to drink
Right.
wherever and whenever I wanted. I was like, there's no way. So I end up renewing and I ended up staying for another 6 months and I get back home and, you know, my sister finally ended up getting married. And so I flew from Australia to Hawaii. That's where she got married. And I feel like I looked like just a completely different version of myself than before when I left. And I think my family was like,
Whoa.
oh, yeah, what happened there? You know, I was just pure puff. And so I ended up moving. I think I moved to Newport at that point. I moved in with a bunch of random people off Craigslist. And that was like from that point on until I got sober, like the only people I knew were like Craigslist people. And so people that I ended up living with.
It's a thing. I did the same thing.
Oh,
So
no.
that's how I always found my rooms to rent. It was Craigslist.
Yeah. And those were
I
my
lived
friends.
with like Taiwanese people.
Yeah.
I lived with like, it was
The
perfect.
Craigslist people.
Yeah.
Because I could do whatever I wanted. They had no
Exactly.
idea. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, they don't like
Perfect.
Yeah.
English second language. It was
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, oh, I forgot this. When my last, I think it was my birthday, I ended up getting punched in the face in Australia too. So I was like court ordered to go back to Australia, and I like, of course, didn't do that. But
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help. Wait, you got punched
by who?
in
Yeah.
the face. Walk us through this. We
We need the story back up. Rewind. Rewind.
Let's pause there for a
I
second.
forget, what are they called? The the Australian Aboriginals. Yes. So they were living outside of a grocery store.
Yeah.
And I was in a blackout, and I thought it would be funny to flip them off.
Oh no.
And we were like, ha ha ha, walking away. And she goes, hey, bitch. And I turn around, and she just socks me in the face. And then the dude socks my guy, and the guy that I was hanging out with in the nose, and he broke his nose. And the police station was right there. And so they, the police got involved, and they couldn't find him, or they ended up finding, I don't know. I don't remember a lot of things. Like alcohol really does mess your brain up. So, but I had gotten court ordered to go back, and I was like, I don't even care, like, at this point. But I was living with Craigslist people. That's what made me think of it. One of the girls that I lived with, she was also a heavy drinker, and she, I think, slapped me in the face, or something happened. We had a physical altercation. And we ended up getting other people, it was kind of like a revolving door. We were living on the beach in Newport, literally oceanfront, which was my idea.
Your dream.
Because I was like, I get to go swimming in the ocean whenever I want. Blackouts. This is great.
Right out the back door.
Yeah,
There goes
literally.
Breezy
Like,
again.
where's Breezy? No one knows.
Middle of the night.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Always. It was crazy.
Dude, you're so lucky you're alive.
I know.
That's fucking
I have
insane.
literal scars all over me from the shit that I was doing. And that's obviously I've never done drugs, but alcohol is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what's happening.
I mean, alcohol is one of the gnarliest drugs.
Yeah. And I would be speaking gibberish. I would, alcohol obviously really messes with your bowels too. And so I would literally poop on the street, in public streets. I would be at parties and where I didn't know anyone, wasn't welcome there. And I would literally go and poop on their yard. And people would walk out and be like, what's going on? Who is this girl who invited her? Why is there poop on my Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah. No, alcohol is so bad.
That is one of the most incredible party fouls.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
ever-
Iconic, kind of.
Yeah.
Wait, why does alcohol do that? I've never really.
It's just,
You're just all fucked up, and you're just
I think it just literally
relaxes
it's
your whole anus.
When people say you have when people say you have what is the bubble gut, whatever, that is alcohol. That's what it does. And so I had to do a lot of work on my gut after getting sober. But it was a thing. That was my people would take pictures of me. Thank God I got sober before Instagram. Where everyone had their phone out.
Right.
But so it was a nightmare living in Newport, and I got to walk, wherever, to all of the bars, and there's pictures of me leaning over things in blackouts, passed out.
During this time, where did your dad know that this was going on?
No.
Or, parents didn't know at all.
No.
Really?
No. I was the queen of when I would go home, and it was not often, but I would
And
go
were you
home.
having to drink every day? Like, were you physically addicted at this point?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe I would wake up with the shakes, and instead of drinking, if I knew I had to do something, I would take what is it
Like
called?
benzos? Xanax, or-
Dramamine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would pop
Interesting.
Dramamine all the
Oh,
time.
shit.
So because it's like the same type of feeling of like I needed,
It calms you down.
my body.
Wow.
That's
Or
so
I would be
interesting.
like puking every morning,
Yeah.
and I would take Dramamine, and then I would seemingly, look fine to people. And so it was like, like I would be, if I knew I was going to go see my family and I was like hungover or something, I would take Dramamine, and even still, like I would end up running somewhere to puke, and and then I would just be like, I'm fine, everything's fine.
Wow.
Um,
And were you in college at this point? Were you going to
no,
school?
I had dropped
or-
out at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So
Was
After-
that from Australia? So once you
I
left
failed all
Australia?
my classes in Australia.
Okay, I was going to say, that's what I was trying to figure. Did you
Yeah.
graduate or like?
I was
literally-
just out here for the ocean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The Australian boys in the ocean.
Yeah.
And so I end up back home. I moved from like Newport to San Diego to LA like 17 times within like 2 years. And because I couldn't, keep a Craigslist roommate either. Like they were like, this girl gotta
The
go.
Craigslist people
Or
were
it
like,
was,
no.
or it was like, I was the queen at being the victim. And I would call my mom or I'd call my dad and be like, she hit me. I need to get out of here. And then it was like, oh, of course. Like I'll help you. Whatever you need to do. We'll move you, whatever.
Yeah.
And at one point, I ended up living in LA, and I started doing background work, which is like, if you
Like on the
watch
studios?
TV shows
Yeah.
and movies, like
Extras.
the extras,
Yeah.
like you're the people in the background. And that was the greatest job for an alcoholic, because if I felt good that morning, I could pick up the phone, you call like a line, and they would be like, okay, we'll get you on this show today. And so it was like, I never had to have a schedule. I didn't have to be told where to go or when to work. Like it was always my decision. Like, okay, I feel decent today. Like I'll go work, and I need the money.
Yeah. How much would they pay?
Huh?
How much would you get paid to do
Like $360
for a day?
For a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah.
good money,
Oh, it was
girl.
insane. Yeah. So
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, I only have to work once this week,
Right.
And then most of the time they always work you overtime, and so then the overtime is
you get even more.
insane money.
Wow.
So there was days I'd get paychecks
So
for
were
like
you-
$1,000.
Were you in
Yeah.
like the union? Like were you?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
I don't know how I got in there.
I was gonna
but-
say, how-
Yeah,
how
I don't
did you-
know.
oh,
I don't
interesting.
remember. But yeah, so that was like best job ever. And I lived with two guys off of Craigslist down there. And then I ended up then I moved to San Diego because the guys, I don't know, something happened with them. Of course, it was always everyone else's fault but my own. Then I moved to San Diego to be closer to my sister. And then it was like I was, just doing bad things down there that, I should not have been doing. And then I think I moved back to LA at one point. I don't know. It's all such a blur. While I was living in Newport, one of my roommates sexually assaulted me in a blackout. And then it was like, oh, no. Like, it's fine. Like I'm not, it was my fault. Like I shouldn't have been that drunk. And then I moved back to LA, and then the same thing happened. This girl off Craigslist, her friend ended up sexually assaulting me, but that night I was not drinking, or I was kind of drinking, but not really. And so at that point I became severely suicidal. And so I I had horrible PTSD, and I end up moving down to San Diego yet again to go be closer to my sister. And I was living in a studio apartment by myself, drinking all day, every day, just extremely suicidal, crying, getting on my, I would literally listen to sad songs just to try and cry.
Wow.
To feel something. And I always say in meetings, I started drinking to numb, but then it got to a point where I was drinking to try and feel something,
Totally.
And so I I got to this place where it was Halloween. I was dressed up as Saw. And I was
You mean
out.
like Jigsaw?
Yes,
Like
I was literally dressed as Jigsaw.
thing?
Yeah. And I obviously black out. And I think that everyone is like, my PTSD was so bad that I thought everyone was trying to kill me. And so I was hanging out with a group of people that I'd known like my whole life. And I had like beer bottles and I just like start throwing them at people. And I take off running. And to me, I feel like I was in like a form of psychosis, you know, and I go and I hide in a bush for like 2 hours. Everyone's looking for me. And
asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
it was at that point, you know, I finally like call one of my best friends from childhood and she comes and finds me and we're walking back to my house and we have to pass like a freeway overpass. And I was like, fuck it. You know, like at that point, like I had been suicidal like my whole life, but I was just like, this is, I can't keep doing this. You know, I was writing suicide notes like every other day.
Wow.
And I start climbing up the overpass and her and her boyfriend get me down.
Dressed
and
up as Jigsaw.
Dressed up as Jigsaw. Can you imagine driving
Set the stage. You know what I
and
mean?
literally looking up and being like, oh shit.
There's
what
Jigsaw
the fuck is
climbing up.
going on?
So
yeah.
good.
And so and like
Like you
I had,
couldn't tell if it was
full
like, is this
face
just
makeup on,
Halloween?
too.
You know what I mean? Or like, oh no, she's serious.
She's like
dead.
actually
She's
gonna
not
kill
fucking
her.
around.
Yeah.
And so she gets me down and she, you know, gets me a bath. And I think at that point I've had like a lot of sinus surgeries and I had just had a sinus surgery.
Why,
and so
why were you having sinus surgeries?
I don't know. It just runs in the family. I
Oh,
don't
okay,
know.
got it. I wasn't sure if it was like a little cocaine.
No.
Or like, here we
And
go. What's
and
going on?
so I had like pills from my surgery. And I told my best friend, she like made me a bath and I was just hysterically crying. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. Just let me die. And she was like, she came in and she was like, hey, you know, you're kind of making my boyfriend really uncomfortable. So I think we're going to leave. And I was like, if you leave me, I'm going to take the pills. And she was like, okay. And I was like,
wow.
oh, okay. Like my manipulation tactic didn't work for the first time ever.
Right.
And, you know, I sat there and I was hysterically crying and she pretty much was just like, you know, she left and I was like, okay, like that was the jumping off point, you know, quite literally. And I woke up the next morning and at that point I had been seeing a rape treatment therapist out in Orange County or in LA. And so I had a session with her the next day and I drove up to LA and I just got honest and I was like, I'm super suicidal. I can't stop drinking. And, you know, I almost killed myself last night and my best friend didn't even care. And, you know, the same victimhood that I carried out throughout my whole drinking career. And she was like, okay, like, I think I'm going to call your dad and we're going to get honest and we're going to get you into treatment. And this was the second time I went to treatment. I forgot about that. The first one, my dad saw me in a blackout for the first time. And that night too, I said I was going to kill myself or ran away with some dude. And I ended up going back home and to my sister's house. And he woke me up that morning and was like, so, you know, do you know what a blackout is? And I was like, no, I have no idea. What is that? Meanwhile, that was like the 700th time I'd blacked out. And he was like, oh, okay. You know, and he's so sweet. And he like reads it off of his phone, like a definition and was just like, this is what a blackout is. And like, now that you've had one, you're going to have them again. And was like so worried and was like, I'm going to, you know, I think we should send you to treatment. And I like totally got away with where I went. I was like, oh, well, you know, I have all these issues because of mom and I don't want to date men. And I think it's just that situation. Like, and I played the the card. And so I ended up going to like a sex and love addiction treatment center.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I
And
didn't even know they had. I
yeah.
didn't have
Wow,
meetings.
so
Yeah.
What was that
How
like?
was that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
let's-
so weird.
I've been to those meetings before.
Yeah,
Yeah, SWA
same.
meetings?
Yeah.
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 And
But
I went.
a treatment center.
It was
I wanna-
a 6-bedroom women's house
Yeah.
up in
What- why
Northern
did-
California.
Why was he thinking SLA? Just because
Oh, I
She
said it.
manipulated
I
the
manipulated the whole
situation.
thing because I
it's
was
not
like,
alcohol.
it's not alcohol. It's the fact that, you know, you don't want me to be like mom. And so now I can't feel my feelings and I don't want to date. And like, I
Because you
think
didn't want
if
to give
I,
up alcohol.
yeah.
You were like, it's
oh
not
yeah,
that.
it's not alcohol. I was like,
it.
if I just figure out how to have like an emotional connection with someone, because at this point I am a shell of a human.
Right.
I was like, if I can just figure out how to have an emotional connection with someone, I don't think I'm going to drink the way I drink. And, you know, he was like, oh yeah, like same thing in his head. It's like, I don't want you to be like mom. So yeah, let's totally send you
Yeah.
there. And that was the first time someone told me I was an alcoholic. And
While you were at the.
yeah,
Interesting.
while I was at a SLA treatment center, she was like, have you ever thought, you know, maybe it's the alcohol? And I was like, absolutely
No way.
not. No way.
No.
Was it inpatient? Like you went and checked in?
hmm
Wow.
That's so interesting. I didn't
Yeah.
even know that was the thing.
So
Yeah.
walk us through that. Like, what does that look like, and how long were you there?
I
And-
was there. I was only there for like 2 weeks, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they did like 2-week. I don't even.
So
maybe
it's like
it
an
wasn't.
intensive. It's almost like an intensive.
maybe it was more like an intensive. I honestly don't
Interesting.
remember because
Okay.
I still
Okay.
drank after it.
Yeah.
But they took us to SLA meetings, and you know, that was the first time I did like a lot of work surrounding the relationship with my mom, and
Trauma therapy.
yeah,
and-
a
right.
lot of trauma therapy round the clock. And like all of the women were like, your mom's been married that many times, like, you know, and I was
Yeah.
like validated
Yeah.
for why I felt the way I
Right.
felt for the first time. Like everyone was like, whoa, your life was crazy. And I was like, it wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, okay. And so then I think after that, it was like, well, now I have a reason. Like they just told me that my life was so fucked up. And so like I didn't get sober for another 2 years after that. But I stayed sober for probably 2 months because that woman told me I was an alcoholic. And I was like,
No.
I'm going to prove her wrong. I will just not drink, you know. And eventually, you know, I end up at a bar, and it's kind of similar to like the story with the whiskey and the sandwich, you know, and the
Yeah,
milk or
whiskey and
whatever.
milk,
and
yeah.
and I was just like, you know,
Works
well,
so
I just
well,
have to
take
have
another.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just have one. And then it was like, you know, my first time drinking, and I was completely blacked out to terrible things. I was a biter. I would just bite people and draw blood. Yeah.
Breezy the biter. Watch out now.
Yeah.
That's another curveball.
Yeah, I
that was like that was
know.
really
I
good. That was a
know.
good.
You like how I
curveball.
started this saying how
I
boring
just
I was?
bite people.
So yeah, so I just ended up in really not great situations. But those last 2 years, it was like I had that little bit of information that, you know, obviously knowledge does not keep you sober, but I had the knowledge of maybe I'm an alcoholic, and maybe the reason I felt at home when I went to those meetings with my brother is because maybe that's where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
And so I'm so grateful that I had all of those little experiences because, you know, obviously knowledge isn't going to keep me sober, but most people aren't raised in recovery like I was. And so I always knew that when shit really got bad, there was always going to be a place for me to go. So, so eventually my therapist called my dad and, you know, told him enough to where he was very scared. And yet again, like I still had the story of like, hey, I was just raped, so I'm going to go to a trauma center because still it's not alcohol.
Right.
And but thank God it was a dual diagnosis place. And so I did my intake over the phone. It was in Florida. And they were like, okay, well, like, how much are you drinking? And I was like, oh, like, you know, I just drink like maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Like, it's not a big deal. And, you know, I lied through my teeth, and they were like, okay, well, you know, most people, you know, aren't necessarily honest during the intake process. So just don't book your flight home. Like, you never know what's going to unfold. And I was like, no, it's just trauma. I swear. I'm just literally super suicidal. And, so I ended up booking my round trip home. I was like, I'm going to be there for 30 days and that's it. And I end up getting there, and I was, you know, finally going to AA meetings, and it was like, listen for the similarities and not the differences. And all of a sudden it was like that same feeling when I was, you know, 17 years old again. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, I think I actually have a problem with alcohol. And, you know, I didn't have like a crazy detox to where it was like, I wasn't, you know, my detox was before I got to treatment, because I was so terrified that they were going to say I'm an alcoholic again. So I was like, you know, the few days leading up to it, I was, you know, taking Dramamine and just having a few. And, you know, and so by the time I got there, I was like, I'm okay. I don't need to do detox. I'm not an alcoholic, I swear. And, but it wasn't until, you know, finally going to meetings there and hearing everything that everyone, you know, had shared, and just listening for the similarities, and knowing that deep down, like, I knew once I start drinking, I cannot stop. And,
asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
yeah. And so I ended up staying 89 days, and it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I never had to take a drink again, God willing. So
Wow. And when was that? What's your sobriety day?
November 10th, 2015.
Wow.
Holy shit, dude.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's rad.
10 years.
I'm in my
Almost.
10th year.
Yeah.
10 years.
I'm in my 10th year. Yeah.
It's really rad.
And life is just getting worse. No, I'm just kidding.
Life does be life still.
Well, lifes.
It does.
Life be life.
I know.
It goes up and down.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
one of those
like-
misconceptions that people think when you get sober, it's just
Yeah.
like everything is so amazing and
Yeah.
everything is nothing bad ever happens again.
Yeah.
But like the reality is things still happen. We just don't deal with them how we used to.
Yeah.
Even when they fucking suck
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's also like, I feel like when you get sober, that first year can be so great.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
'Cause,
Pink
Oh
cloud.
yeah,
You're
best
like,
year was
holy,
the
you're coming
best.
back.
Or the first year, yeah. Oh my god.
because you got all the, you know, the monkeys off your back, right? Like you're free. Like
Yeah.
everyone's so happy. Your family's like
Yeah.
praising you. Like, I feel like that first year is so just incredible.
Yeah.
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 And then life starts to set in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
then it's no longer like, oh my God, it's so amazing you're sober. It's like, you're a normal
Yeah.
human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the
It's like
real
man
work
up and
comes.
get to
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
And
You got to
for
pay your bills.
Yeah.
You know what
And
I
for
mean?
me, I
Like-
had hit it for so long and so well in my mind that like finally going to treatment and like saying I'm an alcoholic, and for people to, for my family especially, to be like, oh, okay. Like that's why she was, you know,
the way
she was. And it was just like, I didn't have to hide anything anymore, you know?
Right.
How did your family react when they all found out?
My dad came to family week at my treatment center, and I don't think he was surprised, you know, like there was so many times he, you know, I called him from the drunk tank, and you know what I mean? Like in my mind, I thought I was hiding it really well, but
But he knew something was going
yeah,
on.
like
You can't
obviously,
black out that
Yeah.
often and not cause some wreckage. You know what I mean? Like
right. And I think
adrift in the ocean.
yeah, and I think for him it was like I'm
Literally.
his only like blood daughter. My sister is very much his daughter as well, but he definitely was protecting me in so many ways throughout my life, and like always bailing me out of everything. He was the, you know, the phone call I made when I was in jail, and you know, so it's like I think for him, he was much better at like the Al-Anon stuff with me, like than he was with my brother.
Mhm.
And so for me, it was like, okay, like she's just going to be okay, you know? And I think for my dad, it was like, okay, thank God. But my brother, he had a pretty big resentment against me because
really?
he felt like I like stole
The attention.
AA from him.
Stole AA
Was he
from him.
sober at that? So
Yeah, he I think he had just gotten into a program at that point again. But he, like I said, you know, he was way worse than I was. He, you know, and he got into a lot more trouble than I did. And so he kind of felt like I was like stealing the thunder about it, and he didn't understand. And so I remember one day I wrote him a letter, and I was just like, I've literally blacked out like over 1,000 times. Like, I know you may not have seen it. I was just better at hiding it, you know?
Interesting.
And so now.
So he kind of wanted AA and that stuff to be kind of like his thing.
Yeah.
And then you came in, the older sister,
Yeah.
get sober.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, even though you didn't know it,
Yeah.
I was an alcoholic. And
Yeah.
he almost felt like what, you were
Yeah.
faking it, or like
I don't think
just
faking it. I think he just
he wanted that to himself.
Yeah,
That
I
was
think
like
he
his
wanted
special-
it. Yeah,
He was like,
his
"This is
thing."
mine.
Yeah, and it's like,
it's so interesting.
yeah, and we've
It's
never
very alcoholic.
Yeah,
I feel like,
totally.
right?
And we've
It's
never
very-
talked about it since. Like that was,
Right.
you know, I wrote him that letter, and you know, and I actually think he was using during that point. So I don't even know if he remembers reading it or not, but we've never talked about it since. I had 9 months sober, and we went on a trip to Michigan for a family reunion, and he had relapsed like a little bit before that. And I had made a comment that would have been his year sobriety date that weekend. And I said that out of my own selfish reasons, because that was my year anniversary of my sexual assault. And I wanted people to like be nice to me. But instead of saying that, I was like, I brought up his shit, which I was the queen at doing, you know, for a long time. I was very self-righteous. So I understand why he was, you know, upset with me. It was like, look at me, I'm doing all the right things, and like shoving it in his face. So that night he ends up getting alcohol poisoning. And we were sharing a hotel room, and I woke up to him like convulsing.
Oh no.
And I rush over to my dad's hotel room, and my dad comes over, and they had to call the ambulance, and my dad was like, just go stay in my room. And my dad is a normie, you know, he has a glass of wine here and there, and he had a bottle of wine. And I remember just staring at that bottle of wine, and I was like, because my older brother came into the hotel room too and was like, this is your fault, you fucking shamed him for, you know, not having a year. And and I was like, I'm just sad because I'm so traumatized at what happened to me last year, you know. And my dad obviously knew that it was the year anniversary for me too. And so he was like, just go stay in my room. And I just stared at that bottle of wine for like an hour, just like, just do it, you know. And I started calling my sponsor, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, California time. And obviously she was never going to answer. And I end up praying for the first time, and I was just like, please God help me. And I thought of like, just call your sister. And she immediately picks up and was like, what's going on? And I was like, I want to drink, you know. And her dad, I don't want to call him an alcoholic, but he has his issues too. And so she understands, and she talked me through it. And, you know, that was like the hardest moment in my first year, where I like really had to rely on something higher. On a higher power. And, you know, ever since then, I mean, that moment proved to me that God really does listen, you know, when you actually seek him out, like he will be there and he will help you get through it. And, yeah, there's been a lot of moments like that in my sobriety, for sure.
Did you have trouble with the God thing before that point? Like before you started praying, or like when you went into the program, were you like, what is this God thing? Or did you kind of already have?
No, I was raised in church. My mom went to Christian church, and my dad went to Catholic church. And so I was raised, yet again, like going back and forth doing two different things. But I always had like a pretty good relationship with God. Like I went to like church camp when I was in middle
church
school.
camp.
Yeah. And I had like another similar experience that moment, my second rape, I like went into freeze mode. Like I couldn't move. And all I remembered from my first treatment center was the Serenity Prayer. And so I just started saying it over and over and over again. And my best friend from New York called me at that moment, which snapped me out of that freeze mode. And I was able to get up and get out. And it was like 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was like, who calls someone, you know, on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m.? Like it was just such a God moment that like, you know, so when I got into the program, like I had so many God moments that it was hard to deny that there was something always working in my favor. Because like you said, like I should have died so many times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
It hasn't been hard, but it's been, I feel like it's changed so drastically. My first like 4 or 5 years being sober, I didn't do what was suggested. Like I never hit my knees and prayed or anything like that. And it took going through like horrible trauma sober and like still feeling like, oh my God, I want to die, to be, you know, this old timer came up to me and was like, are you hitting your knees? And I was like, no, people actually do that. And he was like, yeah.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, humbly offered yourself to him. And I was like, oh, that's what that means. Okay. So I went home that night and I've literally never stopped. Like every single night before I go to bed, I hit my knees and I pray. And it's, you know, it always shocks me still to this day, like how quickly things are answered when I pray about it. Like I was sharing before we started, like I'm going to be moving out of my apartment soon. My second ex-boyfriend, he died 2 minutes away from my house. And so I've been like debating whether or not I should move because I have to drive by where he died every day.
Wow.
And so I hit my knees and I prayed about it. And I was like, if I'm supposed to move, like make it abundantly obvious. And if I'm not, make that obvious, you know, make it super obvious. And I woke up and I'd already talked to my landlord about it. And I woke up and they were supposed to come to an inspection at my house the other day and yesterday. And they call me and they were like, oh yeah, no, we're bringing somebody to come look at your place. And I was like, oh, okay. He comes in, absolutely loves it. And literally was like, when can you move? And I was like, oh, fuck, this is really happening.
It's
crazy, I was like,
right?
okay, well, I will get all my stuff packed up. And he was like, I'll move in March 6th. So I'll literally have 3.5 weeks to get all my stuff out. I don't even know where I'm going to move, but I know that that's like, if I pray about it and something happens that fast, God is going to handle it. So that's been like the coolest part of my sobriety is just like knowing that when I give things over to God fully, like
it's answered.
It's answered.
When we choose to.
When you choose to.
And that's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
Is like, how long does it take?
Yeah.
Before I choose to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. How much pain do I have to get in?
Right.
Well, it's funny that you say that, like, you didn't even really, your prayer life didn't look a certain way until you went through these things. Cause I was the same. The first 9 months of my sobriety, my meditation and prayer life was basically non-existent.
Yeah.
And then I started going through all these things. I was having panic attacks for no reason every single day. And I talked to my sponsor and I'm like, hey, I kind of want to fucking not be here anymore. This is not, why am I sober? That was like my addict mindset. It's like, what the fuck am I going to be sober for if I feel like this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And she was like, well, what does your prayer and meditation look like? And I was like,
what do you mean?
what? Well, what prayer? Like I literally didn't have any set habits or practices that I was in. And like that day I had to get into it. And the smallest little fucking things change your life like tremendously. But it just and I still go through motions where like I will hold on to shit and not want to give it over until I'm hard-headed as fuck.
Yeah.
But
Aren't
I'm
we
grateful
all?
for those things now, because at least I have that where I'm like, okay, I'm miserable enough that I'll do something about it now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah. What does your prayer meditation look like?
Well, I get up every morning and I'm like, hey, God, I'm getting real super cash, help me relationship. And I'm like, hey, help me like not be a piece of shit today.
Yeah.
And whatever else, I'm like, help me be of service, help me not be in selfishness, help me not be in laziness, help me be productive, help me help other people. These are the things that I try to ask for instead of being like, hey, can I have $1 million? Which is, that was the only relationship I knew with God growing up, right? Is like, I
same.
never really learned.
Yeah.
I grew up Catholic and I was like, my relationship with God, what I thought, literally in my brain and my like child brain, I used to remember, I like, give me this toy that I want, please, you know, like selfish prayers. And then I didn't pray at all or have any relationship with God for a really long time. So now I try, even when I'm like driving in the car, like, you know, I just try to keep that conscious
Contact.
connection and contact open at all times. Because when I don't, that's all I say. Shit gets real weird and
murky.
creepy and kooky real quick, and I don't like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Till I'm at the point where I'm like, all right,
I'm done.
okay,
Wave the white flag.
here.
Yeah. We're very lucky.
Wait, so walk us through the stuff you've done in sobriety, like the sober camp and
Camp Sober Fest.
like for anybody watching, if you don't know, Breezy's got one of the greatest sober camps.
Life-changing. It's life-changing, truly.
How did you start that, and like where did that come from?
So actually, my ex who just passed away, we were going through one of our many breakups, and that was like the first time I had started hitting my knees, and to get me out of that relationship. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, and I was like, I can't keep, like, I work at home by myself every day for Taste Recovery. And I was like, I want to be outside. Like, I just need something with community and like to help other people. Like, I feel like that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And he was like, then just do it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, it's
don't talk about it. Be about it.
Yeah. I just watched a podcast and they talked about the Nike logo, just do it.
Yeah.
And she said, what's the most important word in that sentence? If that's a sentence. No, it's just, because if you think of it, do it. It's like, okay, but you have to just do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that makes so much sense. So that's basically what my dad said. Like, just do it. Like, why are you living in fear then?
Right.
Just do it. And so I got into action, and I found a place up in Big Bear that was willing to work with me, because obviously I was like, it was 2 months away. I literally planned the first Camp Sober Fest in 2 months and sold 130 tickets in 2 months with like never throwing an event a day in my life.
Yeah.
And I got up there, and it was like the first day had just finished, and I FaceTime my dad, and I just started bawling, and I was like, this is exactly what I was supposed to do with my life. And I was like, thank you so much. And so that too is like very special with my ex, because it's like, I would have never even gotten to the point of wanting to do Camp Sober Fest if I hadn't been in so much pain, you know? So it's like, I'm really trying to find all the silver linings of like, why did I have to go through this again? Because I have now lost both of my boyfriends to this disease. And but through both of them, like, so many beautiful things had come from those relationships, and Camp Sober Fest for sure, and my relationship with my higher power. Those are like the two things I'm most grateful for in my life, and they came from that relationship. So those are the things I have to think about, you know, because it gets dark in the brain. But yeah, so I've done Camp Sober Fest for 3 years. This year will be our 4th year. Rachel's on the volunteer committee.
I'm a camp counselor. I am. And truly, it was life changing. RJ didn't make it last year.
Listen, I'm coming in next year, all right?
But I've been counting down the days since last time because it is just truly life-changing.
And we had to add on an extra day too, just because I felt like it started out Friday night to Sunday morning, and that wasn't enough. So then we did Friday morning till Sunday afternoon. That wasn't enough. Then the third year we did Thursday to Sunday, and it was like, it just goes so fast.
Yeah.
Right.
And so this year we're doing Wednesday to Sunday, which is insane.
That's so cool.
Because I don't sleep the entire time I'm there.
Right.
I literally am just like fueled with so much love and excitement that I like try to lay down and I'm like, oh my God, it's here. But this past year was the first year that we went to the Sequoias. So we had a lake, which was just crazy. It just, water, I feel like, is so healing for so many people. And like, especially me, because apparently I love going into bodies of water. But I didn't really put two and two together. But it's, and the time, like the first 2 years when it was just 2 days, like they didn't get time to like really connect and like meet each other. That extra day was so different for so many reasons. But like that last day, everyone was hugging and crying.
Right.
Like normally Camp Soberfest was you wake up on Sunday morning and everyone just leaves. Like no one even makes it to breakfast. No one cares about saying bye to everyone. Everyone's like tired and ready to go. This year it was like everyone showed up to breakfast and I was like, what's going on?
That's
like,
so cool.
No one's left yet. Like, oh, this is crazy. And everyone just wanted to say bye to their new camp friends. And I was like, that is so cool.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
So the fact that now we get an extra day on top of it, like I can't even imagine.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
And it was the first time ever that since I've done like social media as a job, that I didn't have any service.
Yeah.
And I like just to be completely unplugged from my phone. That was so magical.
Probably life changing in and of itself.
No, truly. Yeah.
I had like this stupid little device that I had to have on me to get Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you need some kind of service. But I'm just saying the fact that everyone is just like out in nature, enjoying each other's company,
Unplugged.
being present, unplugged mostly. Except there was like one people that have Verizon that have a couple
like,
people
get off
had a
your
couple
phone.
bars, but I didn't have anything. And I was like it was like totally a God thing for me in that moment because I was going through a lot of like just being so overwhelmed with my fucking phone and like working from it 24/7 and it was just it's so good. You'll understand.
And the
this
morning meetings, Rachel and Jenna, they were the ones in charge of it.
Did the morning
and like
meeting.
I think I cried in every single meeting that trip. Like it was crazy. I don't even know why I was crying. It was just
experience during breath. We do breath work, we do waterfall hikes, we do high ropes course. I didn't complete it this year, but next year
Why didn't you? You freaked out or what?
I freaked out.
I can't do
I was
heights.
doing the splits. I was doing the splits up
but
there.
you still made it to the...
They let me go. I didn't finish the whole thing.
The
What do you
zip
mean
line,
doing the
okay.
splits? Like, what was the?
There was this one part, and I can't remember. Was it two
Like
ropes
ladders?
or something?
Like,
maybe the ladders.
You had to like swing across kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was
and then
it.
she
That
would
took
just
me
go,
out.
her legs would
my
go,
legs would just... I was literally like, help, please. I couldn't get over that part. This year I'll do it.
You'll do it for sure.
We were on a time crunch too. When I did it, I think we only had like 10 minutes left.
get
So they were
back
like,
to
hurry
lunch.
up. And I was like, I can't.
We got to lunch and there was like one hamburger patty left. I was like, sorry guys.
But it was so fun.
Yeah. It's definitely it keeps me alive in those, dark moments.
If you had to describe, like, for someone that doesn't know what we're talking about in like, just a little blurb about Camp Soberfest, what would you say?
It is a week-long retreat now that gets you back to your inner child before drugs and alcohol took place. And for me, I feel like a lot of us had, you know, hard childhoods and we missed out and we had to grow up way too fast. And so this is really dedicated towards just, you know, getting back to being a kid and like giving yourself that time and space to be stupid and make mistakes and have fun and make new friendships. So many people show up by themselves, literally not knowing a single person, just
and
because
with family.
Yeah, just because they're like, you know, where do people find other sober, cool people? Yeah. She came to Camp Spooky Fest too.
She did?
Yeah, all the way from Texas. Like we get people all over the place.
So you're creating more camps.
Yeah,
more than just like the summer camp.
Yeah.
'Cause I feel like I see constant. It's almost like there's a few now.
Yeah, we did Spooky Fest. It was over Halloween weekend. It was much smaller. I think we had 45 or 50 people out
Which
in Joshua Tree. Yeah. And that was Friday to Sunday, I think. So, but it was like the same thing. Like people at the end of the day just want connection.
For sure.
And that's essentially what Camp Sober Fest or Spooky Fest, whatever the retreat is. We just bring people together in like a very, very loving place. We do not tolerate any type of bullshit. And, you know, I had to tell people that they weren't welcome at future retreats after hearing certain things. Like, we just want to make sure it's like a very, very safe.
Yeah. What do you mean? What happened?
Like just making inappropriate comments to women and, stuff like that, like making women feel uncomfortable, or like we have a large group of gay men that are now going to camp. Like if there's any sort of like making people not feel welcome, like, absolutely not. That's not, this is not the place for you then, for you know? And, there's this one guy, his name's Angel. And he showed up, and he knew one other person, and he was like, I remember he was swimming in the lake and he was like, you have no idea how many gay men's retreats I've been on, and I've never felt this loved and this welcomed up, you know? And so it was like,
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And he was like, this is so healing to have straight men welcome me and not judge me and just let me be me for the first time. And ever since then, like, he's become like a part of our little group. Like he lives in LA.
When you meet Angel, man, Angel needs a TV show.
He needs to be on this podcast. Yeah,
truly.
For sure. I can't wait for him to get a year so he can be on our podcast. But
is that a rule for you guys?
Yeah, because our whole podcast is centered around your first year of sobriety.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our thing is disclosing all of the truths about your first year. Like we don't go into like your addiction or anything. Like it's strictly just your first year.
Let's talk about that first 12 months.
Yeah.
What was that like?
All of the things that you were told to do, to not do. What did you actually listen to? You can make all of the mistakes and stay sober no matter what. That's kind of like, what we try to show people, and that there's many different ways to do it. There's not one way, regardless of what your sponsor's telling you.
There's no way it's perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In your first year.
Yeah. And so and it's cool. Like for newcomers listening to to what we go into, it's like, oh, like, they did get into a relationship and then they ended up relapsing, and like really hearing that type of perspective rather than just hearing your sponsor be like, hey, don't do this, So it's been really cool too. That's another thing that's brought me a lot of joy.
What's it called again? What's
Sober Disclosure?
Sober Disclosure podcast.
Disclosure. Yeah.
Go check it out.
Yes, please.
Wait, so walk us through Taste.
Taste.
That's how I feel like you and I first talked,
right?
Like
that was years ago.
You reached out.
Yeah.
Get the sober living on there.
Yeah. So Taste Recovery started out because I went to a sober living in Florida, and my sober living owner was a male who lived in New York, and he rarely ever came down to like actually see it. Mind you, it was a women's sober living, and he didn't have men's sober livings. Like he just, for whatever reason, wanted to have a women's house, and he would like take us out to dinner and like treat us like we were his girls. Oh yeah. It was, and like the girls that weren't like probably sober, we would see him coming out of his room at night. Like, yeah, it was bad.
Wait, and he stayed there too?
So when he would come into town, he would live there.
What?
Bro.
Yeah.
That's
what?
some Florida shit.
Oh yeah, that was during the bad times in Florida.
So is that place still open or what's...
No, it got shut down maybe like 6 months after I left because I started telling my treatment center. So my treatment center was like, they were trying to get me to go to Delray. I didn't want to go to Delray. I wanted to go to Tampa. And so,
why Tampa?
Well, it was close to my first ex.
Okay. So there's a dude, there's a guy.
The norm. Yeah.
First year sobriety.
Yeah. Yep. And so I had never had a boyfriend until I got sober. That was my first boyfriend, was my treatment boyfriend. And he was living in Ocala, and Tampa was going to be like the closest part that I could still drive to go see him. And so I ended up convincing my treatment center to send me there, and not only me, but like 4 other women from the treatment center, knowing that this place was like essentially, a trap house. And we had a house manager, but she was getting loaded, and it was a mess, pure chaos. Yeah.
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
And I was the one that ended up getting kicked out of that sober living because it was a crazy story. And you stayed sober? I stayed sober through it. Yeah.
Wait, what did you get kicked out for? I need to know.
This is really embarrassing.
Sober disclosure.
I did disclose this on our podcast. So there was a girl that came with me from the refuge, and her and I were dating best friends in the treatment center. And so like the 4 of us were really good friends. And her boyfriend she was Mexican, and he would call her the Mexican. Like that was like his like endearing, sweet nickname for her. Okay. And she was getting loaded, and I was going to go tell on her, because the one rule that they did actually enforce at the sober living was, if you know someone's getting loaded and you don't tell us, you're also going to get kicked out. Right. And so I was going to go tell on her, and she knew. And so she told the house manager that I called her the Mexican as like a derogatory term, even though like that had become like her nickname in treatment. Right. So, and she was like full on tears, like hysterically crying to our black house manager, who was like, "Oh, so you're a racist," and kicked me out and called my dad, told him I was a racist. Yeah, it was really bad. It was very embarrassing. And I was like, honestly, and I told them, I was like, no, this is what's really going on. I was going to come and tell you that she's getting loaded. And they were like, no, that's not what's happening. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
Did they drug test her? So she ended up staying.
She ended up staying. They didn't test her.
Did you ever talk to her again, or was that?
Yeah, actually. When my ex had died, her and I went back to Florida to go visit. At the refuge, they have like a wall for all the clients that have passed away. So they did like a ceremony for him. And so her and I went, which is crazy. But she had like poured water all over my suitcases, and like it got ugly.
Okay, so because of all of this is why you started Taste.
Yeah. So
Taste was,
so because
bring
of
it
that,
back in. No, I get it now.
So because of this like crazy experience, I ended up going back to California and going to a sober living that was a very good sober living. It's still operating today. And I realized how important it is to end up in a safe environment, you know, that there are people out there that actually do want your best interest at heart. And so I started Taste Recovery, which is an app and a website that helped people find sober livings. You could leave reviews on them so that people know what's really going on behind the
into.
closed doors.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to, talk to people on the phone and they're like, oh yeah, everything's great. Everything's, then you get there. And then you get there and you're like, wait, this is what's really happening. So, so I started Taste Recovery as strictly just sober livings. And then about 4 months ago, we launched Residential Detox, IOP, PHP on the app too. So yeah, it's been, quite the journey. It's far harder than I ever imagined. But it's, I have people come up to me all the time when I go to networking events and they're like, you started that? That's crazy. I use it all the time. So it's like,
how many people use it? And like,
we have thousands of centers on it. We get probably 800 to 1,000 people downloading the app alone a month.
Wow.
And then the website took a big dump because I hired the wrong marketing team last year. A friend had suggested them. They didn't know. From
like an SEO perspective?
Yeah, they didn't know how to actually do SEO on a React whatever website. They were only used to WordPress websites.
Got it.
And so our entire marketing just went completely to zero overnight. Oh, wow. They completely ruined everything that we had built. And so, so this past year I hired a different team who's like one of the best in the country, just not for treatment, but for marketing in general.
Just in general.
Right. Yeah. So, and they finally have gotten us back up, if not better, than we were before. So that was like the craziest part of this past year was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I've done this. I started it during COVID. Right. So yeah, it's been a long time coming. And, but the app never was hurt by it. So thank God. But
what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned as a business owner? Like walking through, just staying alive.
When to ask for help. And that I think has transferred over into my personal life too. That like, I absolutely do not know everything, not even close.
Right.
And there are people out there that know so much more than me. And to like, just pick up the phone and be like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, and my biggest fear in being a business owner and handling this specific industry with so much care is like, at the end of the day, like if I do something wrong, like that could end up, really hurting someone or someone ending up dead. So, just like it's a lot of weight and so much pressure on my shoulders. And I constantly, like in the beginning, I was just like, I don't want to be the reason that this thing isn't successful or like that it, ends up hurting someone. Like that's my biggest fear in this. Like, I don't want to be the one that's responsible for that. And so just learning like, well, there are other people that have done something similar and that can help you. And I have like that, what's that? I'm not going to think of the word where I like, don't feel like I'm
imposter syndrome.
Yes. I have gnarly imposter syndrome.
Really?
And so it's like when people like come up to me at these events, I'm like, oh yeah, that's me, and they're like so excited about it. And I need to learn how to like be excited about it too. Right. Yeah, like knowing that it's a good thing. It's helping a lot of people and to be proud of it. So
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you, there's this book that my friend wrote called Brag Better. And it's like, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to send it to you
like
when I get home. I've already read it. Yeah. And especially giving yourself credit, and especially women in business and stuff. I'm not really a woman in business. When I read it, I'm like, it would be definitely more suited.
I mean, you're definitely a woman in
Am
business. What are you talking about? That is right there. Oh my God. That was like it right there. You literally, it just showed up in real time. That was so good.
Rachel, please read the book one more time and then you can give it to me.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
She's like, I'm not really one of those.
Sorry, Mary.
It's totally you, not me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
Okay, I'm a woman in business. I am a businesswoman.
Yes, you are.
And you help a lot of freaking people.
Yeah.
Literally so many humans. Yeah. That's
That was so crazy. The way that just you're talking about the book.
I
And then
do
like,
have imposter syndrome pretty bad. I'm working on it.
Yeah. So yeah, just asking people for help,
Right.
and that's translated a lot in my personal life, like getting back into therapy and like just
it's like
knowing.
so many of the principles we learn in recovery, right?
Yeah.
It's like picking up the phone, calling a sponsor, like
Yeah.
following direction, taking
Yep.
direction,
Yep.
getting on your knees and praying to God. Like
Mhm.
it's all these things.
Yeah. And
think
there's been
are-
a lot of moments where I'm like, I don't think I should be doing this. It's not working. And then I pray about it and it's like, no, you're still supposed to keep doing it for whatever
Right,
reason.
right.
I'm like, okay. just
And
gotta
it's
keep
still
going.
just you, right? Like, are you the only owner? Have you brought in partners, or
It's just me. I have finally I have an employee, so that's been nice. I finally hired my first employee like a month ago.
that's great?
Yeah, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
It's so nice to finally have help. So yeah.
So where are you going next? Where's Taste going? Do you have like what's the
What's
future?
the goals?
Like,
What's your 5-year plan?
yeah, give us the future.
I'm gonna be alone forever.
I'm here.
My goal for Taste is eventually I would like to sell it. Like eventually I would like it to get to be as big, if not bigger than like recovery.com and rehabs.com. But and I was just telling you, I was on a business call on the way up here, and it's like the thing that's so cool about Taste Recovery is that it is kind of attached to Camp Sober Fest, which is creating the community aspect, which
Right.
recovery.com and rehabs
Doesn't have.
.com, they've never been able to figure out how do we make a community around this,
Right,
because
right.
at the end of the day, it is like just like a listing site. And so to eventually kind of have like this very large community surrounding Camp Soberfest and Taste Recovery, and being able to have these events all throughout the country, to where people, when they get connected, it's like, oh yeah, like I have a place that your cousin can go to because I went there and I found them on Taste Recovery or whatever it is, that's definitely, that's the goal. And then once it gets to that point, being able to sell it. And
Asking for help was one of the greatest choices I've made to overcome my addiction.
If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with addiction, don't hesitate. You can reach out to any of us at any time to find help.
And then what? Then just live your life. Just live your life.
well, I would sell Taste Recovery. I would never give up Camp Soberfest.
No, never.
Never.
You better not.
No.
Actually,
No. I actually was looking at YMCA camps in Austin.
Can we do an Austin?
Yeah.
one? Let's do it.
Yeah. That's the goal, is like to be able to have them in like
Multiple different.
Yeah.
Different sta-
Yeah.
Austin
Oh my God,
would
in
be so
Austin
sick.
would
and
be
that's
perfect.
truly like I feel like I grow so much from those weekends that like if I could find a buyer for Taste Recovery next month, I would probably sell
Put
it.
everything in
So
strictly
yeah,
camp-
so I could just
camp
do
fests.
Camp Soberfest all over the country.
How many people went to the camp last year?
I think there was 120.
Got it.
Yeah,
I feel like you could do something so cool with that. Like
Yeah.
being in all these different states and
Yeah.
really turning that into a huge
Yeah.
sober community.
yeah,
I mean,
no,
it's-
and it really does. Like everyone who goes becomes family. They all stay connected to each other in some way
And
or
then
another.
most people end up going like their first year.
Yeah.
End up going again.
Yeah,
Yeah, keep
going
going.
again, and
So-
and if we had them in other places, it's like, oh well, I don't need to go to the Sequoia one, but I would
I can go-
love
yeah.
to go to Austin because I've never been to Austin, and then I can meet people in Texas and have a community there. Like that's the goal for sure, is to do the podcast. Taste Recovery is amazing, but I feel like for me, maybe I'm just in a weird place in my life right now, just losing my second ex, but like it's a little too close to home now.
Yeah.
Like getting those phone calls of people struggling, and it's really, it takes a lot.
heavy.
Like
Yeah.
I would rather just be around the people that are in recovery and help them find a community and a safe place, rather than like the people that are like really in it. It's been
hard.
really hard for me.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at right now.
I love you.
I love you
I'm so
too.
happy that you came today.
I know. Thank God for your 8th birthday.
Oh, yeah, because that's why you reached out. Yeah.
And he was like, I want to be on your podcast. Wait, actually, come be on my podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's
Yeah.
perfect.
He's very
I've
cool.
got one more question. I feel like you're in sort of this unique spot with Taste Recovery where you've developed a platform where you're looking for good ethical treatment centers, right? Because that's really the mission statement.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
there is one, right? So what do you think are the biggest problems in addiction recovery, like in the treatment space?
Ooh.
Like what should people look out for?
Yeah.
Right? I feel like if there's a platform like to be able to give a message to parents or people watching,
Yeah.
like what are the things to look out for? Like, how do you find ethical treatment? What is not ethical treatment? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's a big question.
it's a big
RJ.
question, but if you could,
I feel like there's a lot that goes
There's a
into
lot
all.
to that.
we could do a whole podcast on
Literally,
that. But I think
absolutely. And before I started Sober Disclosure, that was the idea, that I wanted to start a podcast strictly talking about that. But it just felt really dark and
for sure,
heavy.
Stark. Yeah.
But I mean, first and foremost, there's a Facebook group called something about ethics. It's time for ethics in treatment. If you're planning on going to a treatment center, go on there and type in the treatment center, and you're going to find out a lot about a lot of places, because people are, if you're not working the program the way that the program is designed, that you're going to end up finding some really sick people in AA or just in the treatment world regardless. And if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And so those people are, they could be owning treatment centers that your loved ones are about to go to. And they absolutely do not have your best interest at hand. Their goal is to make money off of you, and that's it, get you in and out of the door. There's plenty of treatment centers that were once really good, and then they got a taste of the money, and now they're like, well, yeah, I'd rather focus on, making sure that we make the money rather than really offering good help. I've heard of, a lot of horror stories, such as there's one therapist who's like not even a licensed therapist per like 50 clients. So it's like, how could that person ever actually get the right treatment that they are looking for? So like making sure you're asking certain questions, like, and we have this on Taste Recovery where we ask like, what's your client to clinic ratio? Like, do your therapists, are they actually licensed? Yeah. And just making sure that, the place has a good reputation and doing more research than needed, because at the surface they could be paying for the reviews and you have no idea that, that's why
I always feel like, in a very simple way, it's like if you're looking online and you're stuck in the sea, first and foremost, make sure that they show the team on the website. Yeah. There's so many treatment centers you go on and you go to like About Us. There's not a single person. You can't see anybody who works there. You're like, what? Yeah. Like you don't have your team on your website? Yeah.
They have the pools and the amenities. That's what I always use. I'm active addiction. I'm like, which place has a pool?
Where am I going on my summer retreat?
Where's it located?
Yeah. What amenities do we get? Do I get my own room?
Yeah. What are we talking? But at the end of the day, there's a lot of places with really good amenities that are shit treatment.
Oh,
so
100%.
The team is a lot more important if you're looking.
That's why they
have
to cover all of those amenities. No, because they're rolling in an insane amount of money to afford all of that.
Yeah.
Right.
They're selling entitlements. You know what I mean? That's right. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I feel, I don't know you probably have more information on this than I do, but you know, I don't think that the urine stuff is happening as much now, or the insurance fraud and all of that stuff. Like, and I do think that at the end of the day, people are still finding, you know, there's
always super shady characters.
Yeah, there's always going to be like, okay, what is the actual intention behind this? Is it to help people, or is it, you know, to make money? And I think if people do their due diligence, watch podcasts, learn about it, they're going to
understand.
Yeah, they're going to know that they have every right to ask a lot of questions.
Totally.
Right.
And that's where I think people are in so much desperation before putting their loved one in a treatment center that they're just like, oh my God, you have a bed? Okay, I'm going to just put you in there. But it's like, no. Make sure you're asking all of the questions. And, you know, you can go see the facility. You can, you know what I mean? Like, do whatever it takes, because at the end of the day, like, this is quite literally life or death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and just making sure that people have high morals and asking them straight up, like, hey, like, have you ever partaken in any sort of
fraudulent behavior?
Right.
Yeah. Like, what do you think about that? Like, what, you know? And because when you ask, I know for myself, you can see they're getting a little twitchy, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I mean, it's like it's a gray area, and it's like, you're one of those. Okay. Yeah. And you just know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's so cool.
I'm so glad. I haven't seen either of you in so
I know.
long.
This is such a great surprise.
And now you both have to come on Sober Disclosure.
Okay.
I'm
okay, let's go.
Period. Yeah.
Right. Bring me on. I'd love to. For sure.
Yay, thank you.
Cool.
Yay. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.